B-47s, steady, reliable, unsung and unheralded, yet of supreme tactical importance in this war as it is being fought in New Guinea. They fly in fighter formation with a fighter escort. This is no peaceful trip from Los Angeles to New York. These transports of the 54th Troop Carrier Wing are flying over dangerous country, subject at any moment to attack by enemy planes. That's why the fighter escort. They're on their way to Goodview, an unpleasant little spot in the jungle less than 5 miles from Japanese-held Salamau. They're flying what is called a dropping mission. Dropping began at a desperate time in the history of the war in New Guinea.
Yes, it was a bad show then. The Japanese had captured Buena in July of 1942. Australian forces had retreated over the Owen Stanley Range as far as Orbea Ridge, only 20 miles from Port Moresby. There they took the offensive and managed to push back the Japanese as far as Maiola, a push of about 20 miles. They were putting up a good fight, but they needed more ammunition, food, medical supplies. It was slow, heartbreaking going over the native track they called a road. 2 miles a day was average, 5 miles a day, something to make headlines. The native carrier could only load 40 pounds, and he ate 20 pounds of that on the way in. There were some planes, hardly enough, but no landing strips. And yet it was as plain as the Japs' intention to take all New Guinea and then Australia that the air was the only way in which to bring in supplies. Consultations were held between Australian officials and pilots of the 21st Squadron, then part of the Air Transport Command. It was decided to attempt dropping the supplies. Hurried tests were made. Shortly, men were gathering up the material required, wrapping it with anything on hand to protect it from damage. Blankets, rags, old sacks, anything to help break the fall. They piled the stuff in whatever planes were available.
In a few minutes, the first dropping mission was airborne. This was a new adventure for these men, something novel and untried. They didn't know what to expect. The Australians had everything it took to put up a terrific fight, everything but plenty of supplies, and they were coming. Pilot tells them to get ready to drop. Only 100 miles an hour, throttle all the way back, side slipping to come over the dropping area. A few hundred feet of clearing for a target. And a smoke signal to mark it. Manna from heaven. Almost 60% lost or unfit for use, but something with which to carry on, enough to keep men fighting. By the end of October, the troop carriers dropped more than 150 million pounds of supplies over Myola Lake, always with increasing percentages of recovery. It was as if the heavens were raining supplies.
Engineers' stores. When possible, items such as wheelbarrows were disassembled, dropped in separate parts, then reassembled on the ground. Mail, almost as important to a soldier as food. Gelignite. The best way to drop gelignite is to take it out of the wooden case, wrap about 20 pounds of it between two sandbags and let her go. Rations, every type, native, European. Ammunition, for mortars, machine guns. Grenades. First time we dropped them, the parachute failed to open and the grenades dropped freely. That's the only time I've ever had any trouble. We started very early using parachutes, particularly for the fragile stuff such as medical stores.
October moved into November, and the campaign moved over the Kokoda-Wairopi Trail into Buna. The Americans were in there now, the 32nd Division, fighting side by side with the Australians.
Here come the Biscuit bombers.
Men worked almost 24 hours a day to deliver the biscuits. Natives helped, the invaluable bungs. They needed more blankets for wrapping. Requisitions were quickly made out. There was no time for formalities. Blankets for wrapping. 1,000, 2,000, sometimes 3,000 at a time. If necessary, they practically clean out the warehouses. Reports came in daily. In November, 500,000 pounds were dropped. Altogether, 1,200,000 pounds of European and native rations and stores were dropped during the Buna campaign.
It was dangerous business for the men doing the dropping. Some fell from the aeroplanes and were lost.
Yep, we lost planes, too. Dropping was and still is a tricky business. Now, the men shoved the packages out the door, and they came back this way as the plane moved forward. Sometimes they hit the stabilizer. Result, crack-up. Pulling out of dropping area calls for split-second timing on the part of the pilot. Slight miscalculations have often caused damaged wingtips, elevators, and rudders. We lost some ships and some crews because the pilot was a split-second too late. And of course, there were always the nips hanging around ready to take a pot shot at us. They didn't always miss either.
Allied pressure increased, and by January 31st, the Japanese had been driven back. The Buna campaign was over, an Australian-American victory, and troop carriers and dropping helped make it possible. March of 1943, the Australians and Americans moved on to the Salamaua area. And now there were new places in the jungle that needed supplies. Skindiwal, Bulolo, Balams, Pilimung, Guadalcanal, Goodview, all far from roads, all very close to the Japanese. Now over 30% was dropped by parachute. This is an Australian parachute packing depot.
Australian parachutes are used for dropping rations. American parachutes for ammunition and heavier supplies. The 24-foot parachute is regulation. White for medical supplies, blue for rations and stores, red for ammunition.
This is Goodview, less than 5 miles from Japanese-held Salamau. Men are fighting down there. They need supplies, and they need them now. Requirements are radioed from the front lines. So many European rations, native rations, ammunition, medical supplies. The signal is received at headquarters, New Guinea forces. An outline plan is promptly filled out, sent to the proper depot. So many rounds of mortar ammunition are required.
Fuses and shells are packed together in boxes. The boxes are then packed carefully into a sack. The sack is tied and parachutes attached. Grenades, small arms ammunition. Ammunition of every kind is wrapped the same way. Each package weighs approximately 215 pounds. Goodview needs so many pounds of canned meat. The bottom of the large tin is packed with straw. The smaller tins are then packed in the large tin. The tin is then sealed, and a wiring machine used to wrap the tin securely. The men of Goodview need so many pounds of rice. The sack of rice is placed into a heavy copper sack. Should the rice sack break when it hits the ground, the contents will spill into the larger sack. The second sack is always used when breakage is anticipated. Onions, bacon, sugar, potatoes, margarine, flour, meal, dehydrated vegetables, biscuits, fruitcake, powdered milk. Everything called for in the type B6 European ration, all wrapped or ready to be wrapped. The trucks are loaded quickly, and the parade to the aerodrome is started.
The Australians have filled the order. They notify A3 of headquarters, Advance Echelon, 5th Air Force. Request the necessary transports. A3 passes on the necessary orders to the 54th Troop Carrier Wing. Major Beck, Wing A3, receives the message, racks up the missions. Today they will be dropping missions to Pilimung, Silibu, Guadacasal, Goodview. Captain Lowney of New Guinea forces maintains close liaison. Again, American and Australian cooperation is complete. Brigadier-General Previs, in command of the 54th Wing, keeps constant check of all operations with Colonel Hampton. These are the troop carrier squadrons being briefed. And these are the fighters. They may have made the flight many times, but nothing is left to chance. Usually, there are 3 or 4 fighters to every C-47. They are told where to rendezvous, given all possible information about the dropping area. They start early, to be airborne as close to sunrise as possible. And if luck is with them, they will fly 3, 4 missions this day. Nothing will delay them. Nothing but weather or enemy action. Pursuits are told to get ready for a takeoff in 15 minutes. Planes are loaded. At precisely the right time, the transports are ordered off the ground. Fighters are told to scramble after the C-47s are airborne. Again, where we started, on the way to Goodview. A perfect example of coordination, unique in any story of air transport because it will be done twice, perhaps 3 times the same day by these same airplanes. Radio contact is maintained at all times with operations and with the escorting fighters. Weather is almost as hostile an enemy as the Japs. Sometimes a front will move up faster than a plane will fly.
I'm the guy in that P-38. I'm upstairs looking out for trouble. Sometimes it's weather. From up here I can see it coming. Sometimes it's Japs. I'd better see them coming. Whatever it is, I radio the information to the pilots of the C-47s.
Approaching the dropping area now. The dropping area, hardly 500 feet long, marked by parachutes left from previous missions. Speed 110 miles an hour, altitude 200 feet. The pilot holds his plane nosed slightly downward as a safety precaution against the possibility of a bundle hitting his tail section. Prop pitch is left in climbing RPM at all times. Salamaua, its crooked little peninsula twisting out into the sea. Japanese, Americans, Australians are fighting all around it. £5,000 of supplies in each plane, rations, medical supplies, ammunition, small arms, engineering stores. Some drop free, some by parachute, weeks by trail and native carrier, 1 hour by plane. 170,000 pounds of supplies dropped in February, 535,000 pounds of supplies dropped in March, 240,000 in April, 240,000 in May, and today there is hardly 10% loss. Fighting men of Goodview will go on fighting now. The Japanese will be driven out. New landing strips will be built. New aerodromes for fighters and bombers will be established. The men on the ground will move on to new jungle. And once again, they will be fed from the air by the Biscuit bombers. Australians, Americans, troop carriers, fighters, working in closest harmony with only one overall objective: drive out the Japanese, advance the bomber line, until there is no enemy left to bomb.